We often walk through this world believing we are completely untouchable. We assume the sky above us is calm. We trust the heavy ground beneath us is completely solid. The absolute truth is deeply, profoundly terrifying. In a fraction of a single second, the fragile rules of our reality can completely shatter. Disaster does not wait for an invitation. It does not send a friendly warning. It simply strikes with devastating, entirely unforgiving force. Today, we are unlocking the dark vault. We are examining raw, completely documented footage, moments where everyday life violently collided with absolute uncontrollable chaos. These are the dark seconds, caught on camera, where the invisible line between survival and total devastation completely vanished. You are watching chilling records. Turn the volume up, lock your heavy doors, and prepare yourself, because reality is always far more terrifying than fiction. The open sky is a massive, highly unpredictable and violent force. In Melbourne, an ordinary driver was waiting at a quiet, everyday intersection. The dash camera silently rolls, capturing a completely normal, mundane scene. The atmosphere is quiet, heavy, but absolutely no one could have possibly predicted what happened next. Without a single moment of warning, a blinding, violent flash of pure lightning drops straight from the dark heavens. It violently strikes a vehicle waiting at the intersection. The sudden, raw electrical force is absolutely deafening. A horrific crash of heavy thunder follows almost instantly. Jagged debris violently flies into the air from the sheer aggressive impact. But strangely, this footage sparked intense online controversy. Critics aggressively analyzed the clip. They pointed out a bizarre lack of visible structural damage to the car. They noted the strange disappearing debris. Some strongly claim it is highly edited, but real or not, the chilling footage serves as a stark, terrifying reminder. Nature possesses an awe-inspiring, highly unpredictable force, and it can completely obliterate you in the absolute blink of an eye. Speed is an incredibly dangerous, deeply unforgiving master. On the highly competitive Formula One racing track, drivers constantly push highly engineered machines to their absolute physical limits. They are completely strapped in, entirely focused on raw survival. But even the absolute best cannot control a sudden catastrophic mechanical failure. As the driver aggressively maneuvers the high-speed race, a bizarre, completely terrifying event unfolds. The heavily engineered vehicle suddenly, violently loses all mechanical control. The sheer kinetic speed becomes a fatal, heavy liability. The driver's instantly left with absolutely no options, no possible way out. Operating on pure, raw instinct, he violently braces for the inevitable end. The heavy car aggressively smashes right into the solid concrete barrier. The impact is completely deafening, shaking the very core of the track. But incredibly, these drivers are absolute highly trained professionals. Combined with his incredible split-second reflexes, allows him to miraculously survive a completely unsurvivable crash. He walks away uninjured, deeply defying a highly violent mechanical death. Stopping on a highly active, heavily congested highway is essentially playing a game of Russian roulette with your own life. On October 1st, near St. Petersburg, Russia, a deeply chilling dash camera captures a man standing entirely on the edge of destruction. His car is entirely broken down, completely dead in the water. He is trapped right in the middle of 3 heavy, incredibly busy, fast-moving lanes. He is desperately trying to work on his stationary vehicle. He is completely, terrifyingly exposed, just absolute inches away from massive, speeding metal machines of death. Then the inevitable violent tragedy violently strikes. A massive speeding lorry hurtles directly towards his fragile, stalled car. The driver realizes the fatal, completely unstoppable danger with exactly 1 single second to spare. Operating on pure, terrified adrenaline, he violently leaps over the heavy roadside barrier. The massive lorry completely slams into his stationary car. The sheer kinetic force instantly reduces the vehicle to a mangled, completely shredded wreck. Heavy, jagged debris violently flies across the dangerous highway. Thick, dark smoke completely fills the cold air as the massive truck violently skids to a chaotic halt. 1 single desperate second was the only difference between his life and a completely violent, tragic end. We are entirely obsessed with our glowing, deeply distracting digital screens. We surrender our complete attention, completely blind to the highly dangerous, fatal world right under our feet. In Faridabad, India, a deeply terrifying, entirely avoidable human disaster was captured on film. A mother is slowly walking down a busy, crowded street. She's gently cradling her fragile 9-month-old baby in one arm. Her other hand holds her glowing mobile phone. She is deeply, entirely distracted. Right in her path, completely obscured by a large, heavy advertising sign, lies a massive, completely uncovered, dark manhole. It is a deep, highly dangerous abyss. She steps around the heavy sign to casually answer her call, and then the ground completely swallows her. She violently slips, completely disappearing into the dark, terrifying hole. A brave man named Layender immediately climbs down into the dark, terrifying abyss. With desperate, aggressive assistance, the baby is frantically lifted out first, checked by onlookers, safe. The deeply terrified mother emerges moments later, completely embracing her child in deep relief. By some absolute, completely unexplainable miracle, both escape without severe physical injuries. A chilling, highly disturbing reminder to never, ever take your eyes off the physical reality. Transporting heavy, massive industrial materials requires absolute, deeply focused, and rigid control. In Japan, a heavily loaded industrial truck was navigating a highly dangerous elevated bridge. The massive vehicle is heavily laden with dense, highly dangerous asphalt. It is a massive, rolling weight of complete, unstoppable destruction. The heavy truck suddenly violently clips a smaller van. The violent metallic impact causes the massive, heavy machine to completely lose all control. The driver violently fights the heavy steering wheel, but the sheer, unstoppable mass entirely takes over. The massive vehicle violently swerves off its course. It aggressively smashes straight through the heavy safety barrier. For a deeply terrifying, highly agonizing moment, the massive cab teeters dangerously over the extreme edge of the high bridge, suspended entirely in midair, staring straight down at absolute fatal death. But the heavy, dense weight of the asphalt load violently pulls the entire truck back from the absolute brink of total disaster. Emergency teams spend a tense, highly agonizing hour desperately rescuing the trapped driver. He survives with minor leg injuries, escaping a truly heart-stopping, catastrophic, and fatal tragedy by absolute fractions of an inch. Massive tourist centers are designed to be completely safe, highly comfortable, and deeply inviting. But on a completely quiet Sunday in Huayin City, China, that deep sense of human security was violently, aggressively shattered. It was exactly 5:30 in the evening. At the Huashan Mountain Tourist Center, unsuspecting, completely relaxed visitors are slowly riding a steep, heavy escalator. Suddenly, the very structure above them violently, deeply betrays them. Without a single structural warning, the massive, heavy ceiling completely gives way. The security camera perfectly captures the deep, horrified expressions. Tourists look up in absolute, entirely terrified alarm, and then the heavy, jagged, dense debris violently rains down upon them. Deep, frantic, completely chaotic panic ensues. People desperately raise their fragile human arms for protection. Others aggressively attempt to leap completely over the heavy escalator to escape the violent, crushing architectural chaos. The heavy, dark rubble violently traps several innocent people. They are completely buried under the suffocating, highly dangerous ruins. Emergency services desperately arrive to free the buried victims. The terrifying, completely sudden structural failure leaves everyone deeply shaken, questioning the highly fragile spaces we blindly, deeply trust. The towering, frozen, icy mountains are massive, highly unpredictable, and deeply violent giants. They silently tolerate human presence until they decide not to. A small group of men are standing entirely exposed on a steep, snowy ridge, facing a massive, terrifyingly beautiful frozen landscape. But the deep frozen silence is violently broken. A massive, completely unstoppable avalanche is rapidly charging straight toward their fragile bodies. The sheer, roaring, chaotic, kinetic energy of thousands of tons of heavy ice and snow is completely, entirely deafening. But the men make a deeply terrifying, highly psychological choice. They do not run immediately. They firmly stand their ground. They wait until the absolute, final, terrifyingly last movement before slowly stepping away. The massive, blinding wave of heavy, crushing snow aggressively swallows the entire landscape. As you can clearly see, the heavy white dust completely covers them. But miraculously, the highly specific, steep cliff they stood on completely protected their fragile bodies from the heavy, crushing blow. They survived an absolute, roaring, frozen mountain of pure death by mere inches. Gravity is a deeply relentless, highly unforgiving, and completely fatal law. High above a freezing cold city, a massive, towering TV antenna is deeply coated in thick, heavily dense layers of solid ice. An American man stands far below, aiming his digital camera up at the terrifying, entirely frozen structure. He casually, deeply narrates the highly dangerous scene, nervously muttering, "That is not pretty."
Oh, big stuff, David. Big stuff. Big stuff. Big stuff. Big stuff. Jeez Louise!
At first, only small, entirely insignificant pieces violently tumble to the cold ground, but then the deep, heavy structural integrity violently, completely fails. Massive, incredibly large, highly heavy sections of solid ice suddenly break entirely off. They aggressively plummet downward with alarming, deeply terrifying, and completely fatal speed. The man, entirely overcome with deep, frantic panic, violently ducks. The heavy, massive, frozen debris aggressively smashes onto the hard, concrete ground below with deafening, completely violent force. "Big stuff, David, big stuff," he violently stammers, deeply, entirely shaken. The intensely terrifying, chilling footage proves exactly how incredibly dangerous fallen ice can be. A massive, entirely frozen guillotine violently dropping from the cold, heavy sky. We entirely, deeply believe that the heavy, solid earth below our concrete cities is completely immovable. in Santa Fe, one of Mexico City's key, highly populated and entirely busy business districts. That heavy illusion completely, violently collapsed. The steep, towering, massive cliffside overlooking a highly active, completely congested highway suddenly, violently fractured. Without a single moment of warning, an absolute, deeply terrifying natural catastrophe entirely unfolded. 6,000 cubic meters of heavy, massive, completely crushing earth violently crashed directly onto the busy highway below. A massive, entirely deafening roar aggressively echoed through the heavy concrete canyons. At least 15 massive cars were instantly, violently damaged, completely crushed by the highly aggressive, relentless force of the heavy soil. Miraculously, 2 towering blocks and a large private house, perched highly dangerously close to the cliff's absolute edge, were completely spared as the ground directly beneath them violently vanished. A massive, entirely suffocating dust cloud completely engulfed the massive area. Stunned, deeply terrified drivers frantically scrambled for their highly fragile lives, escaping a completely terrifying, massive natural burial. The ocean is a massive, deeply dark, entirely unstoppable entity. It possesses a raw, completely primal power that fragile humans can never, ever control. In Catan, in the Philippines, a deeply terrifying, entirely raw display of pure, violent, and heavy nature was completely captured on film. The dark, highly volatile ocean begins to violently, aggressively swell. The deep, heavy water aggressively pulls back, slowly building massive, terrifying, kinetic pressure. And then, the dark ocean violently strikes. Immense, completely towering waves aggressively slam into the fragile, completely helpless coastline. The raw, entirely deafening power of the dark water violently shakes the very foundation of the heavy earth. The deeply terrifying force of the massive waves demonstrates exactly how deeply dangerous the dark, deep ocean can truly get. It completely obliterates absolutely everything in its completely violent aquatic path. A deep, highly chilling reminder that we are incredibly small and entirely, utterly powerless against the dark, roaring, completely unforgiving sea. When we watch these incredibly chaotic, deeply violent moments unfold on our screens, our fragile minds desperately try to rationalize them. We sit in our completely safe, brightly lit, entirely quiet rooms, and we deeply, entirely lie to ourselves. We desperately convince our inner psyche that these violently terrifying, completely random events could never, ever reach our own doorstep. We falsely believe that our completely fragile lives are entirely insulated from such absolute, massive, and entirely random devastation. But the sheer, highly unfiltered, deeply terrifying reality captured here completely shatters that fragile, entirely human delusion. We share this earth with completely unstoppable, intensely indifferent, and highly violent forces. Forces that operate entirely by their own violent, entirely chaotic rules. Whether you are driving on a massive, busy highway or simply walking with your entirely fragile child. And remember, that complete safety is just a temporary, entirely fragile state of mind. The world we inhabit is undeniably beautiful, but it is also completely, deeply, and relentlessly unforgiving. Thank you for entirely tuning in to Chilling Records. Keep your eyes completely open, stay incredibly vigilant, and never, ever turn your back on the deep, entirely violent unknown.